السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أهلا وسهلا بكم في البث الثالث، حيث نبحث عن ماهية علم الكلام وعلاقته بالفلسفة. وأكتب الآن النص اللي أنا هقراه. فبدأت بالسلام عليكم، أهلا بكم في هذا التسجيل حيث نتحدث عن ماهية علم الكلام وعلاقته بالفلسفة. كتبت بعض الملاحظات بس سطحية مش عميقة. نبدأ بتعريف الفلسفة. دعونا نبدأ بدراسة الأصول التاريخية لكلمة الفلسفة. الفلسفة كلمة من أصل يوناني تعني محبة الحكمة. وكانت هذه الكلمة لا تشير، ولم تكن هذه الكلمة تشير إلى علم معين علم نظري معين، وإنما تشير إلى كل العلوم النظرية. الهندسة والرياضيات والفيزياء وكان مدي أمثلة بس السؤال الأخلاق والفيزياء والأحياء وهكذا. بل كانت تشير إلى كل العلوم النظرية، الرياضيات والفيزياء والأحياء وهكذا. ثانية واحدة. Aristotle's metaphysics. كان في مبحث عن الثيولوجي. الكلام ده كله نقرأ كل ده. الكلام مهم يعني، بس نقرأ سريعا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The science of being qua being is a science of form, but it is also theology, the science of God. The question now is, how can it be both? And to it Aristotle gives a succinct answer. If there is some immovable substance, this, that is theological philosophy, will be prior and will be primary philosophy, and it will be universal in this way, namely because it is primary. And it will belong to it to get a theoretical grasp on being qua being, both what it is and the things that belong to it insofar as it is being. Shame. So the primacy of theology, which is based on the fact that it deals with substance that is eternal, immovable, and separable, is supposedly what justifies it in justifies us in treating it as the universal science of being qua being. I remind us first of what this primacy is. As we saw in section 2 to 3 above, only beings in the category of substance are separable, so that they alone enjoy a sort of ontological priority that is both existential and explanatory. Thus, working and being healthy are characterized as incapable of being separated on the grounds that there is some particular substantial underlying subject of which they are predicated. Often, indeed, separability is associated with being such a subject. The underlying subject is prior, which is why the substance is prior. لا أنا مش فاهم خالص. نقرأ كله وبعد كده نبدأ نفصص الكلام ونحاول نفهم نحدد ايه هو المهم والمش مهم. If we do not posit substances to be separated and in the way in which particular things are said to be separated, we will do away with the sort of substance we wish to maintain. Similarly, not being separable is associated with being predicated of such a subject. ثانية واحدة، أنا عايز أبحث عن كتاب. Okay. Fan and metaphysics. هو البوك كام؟ book E1. E1. book 2A. book 5. Metaphysics. Book E. ايه رابع واحد. ماشي. طيب كام بقى؟ رقم كام؟ 1026. تعالوا نبحث عن كلمة theology اللي هي موجودة أصلا. ستة وعشرين موجودة في 1026. دعونا نبدأ بدراسة الأصول التاريخية لكلمة الفلسفة. الفلسفة كلمة عن أصل يوناني تعني محبة الحكمة، ولم تكن هذه الكلمة تشير إلى علم نظري معين، بل كانت تشير إلى كل العلوم النظرية، الرياضيات والفيزياء والأحياء وهكذا. وهنا نميز بين العلم النظري والعلم الكيفي. أولا، فما هي ولكن ما العلم؟ معنى الفهم، المراد من هذا المصطلح. نفهم هذه كي نفهم هذا المصطلح علينا أولا أن نميز بين العلم النظري والعلم الكيفي. العلم الكيفي هو معرفة كيف تفعل شيء ما، مثلا معرفة كيف تصبح. أما العلم النظري فهو معرفة أن شيئا ما حقيقة، مثلا معرفة أن القاهرة عاصمة مصر. يمكن للمرء أن يكون لديه علم نظري بدون علم كيفي. يعني مثلا قال يمكن، يعني مثلا يمكن للمرء أن يقرأ كتابا يبين كيف تكون السباحة. كتابا كاملا يبين بالكامل، ولكن إن وقع في الماء، إن سقط في البحر، في الماء، يعجز عن السباحة، لا يستطيع، لا يقدر أن يسبح. والعكس صحيح، يمكن للمرء أن يكون لديه علم كيفي بلا علم النظري. مثلا يمكن للمرء أن يكون ماهرا في السباحة، ماهرا في السباحة تماما، ولكن إن طلبت منه أن يشرح لك كيف تكون السباحة، أساليب السباحة، لا يقدر أن يصفهم لك. أن يشرحها لك أساليب السباحة، أن يصفها لك. دعونا نبدأ بدراسة الأصول التاريخية لكلمة الفلسفة. أولا دعونا نبدأ بدراسة الأصول التاريخية لكلمة الفلسفة. الفلسفة كلمة من أصل يوناني تعني محبة الحكمة، ولكن ما المراد من هذا المصطلح؟ كي نفهم هذا المصطلح علينا أولا أن نميز بين العلم النظري والعلم الكيفي. العلم الكيفي هو معرفة كيف تفعل شيئا ما، مثلا معرفة كيف تسبح. أما العلم النظري فهو معرفة أن شيئا ما حقيقة، مثلا معرفة أن القاهرة، معرفة كون القاهرة عاصمة مصر حقيقة، معرفة حقيقة أن القاهرة عاصمة مصر. بلاش فقط أن باريس عاصمة فرنسا. فيمكن للمرء أن يكون لديه علم نظري بدون علم كيفي. مثلا يمكن للمرء أن يقرأ كتابا كاملا يبين أساليب السباحة بالكامل، ولكن إن سقط في الماء هذا الشخص لا يقدر أن يسبح. والعكس صحيح، يمكن للمرء أن يكون لديه علم كيفي بدون علم نظري. مثلا يمكن للمرء أن يكون ماهرا في السباحة تماما، ولكن إن طلبت منه أن يشرح لك أساليب السباحة لا يقدر أن يصفها لك. دعونا نبدأ بدراسة الأصول التاريخية لكلمة الفلسفة. الفلسفة كلمة من أصل يوناني تعني محبة الحكمة، ولكن ما المراد من هذا المصطلح؟ كي نفهم هذا المصطلح علينا أولا أن نميز بين العلم الفني والعلم النظري. العلم الفني هو العلم الذي يمكنك من فعل شيء ما، فمثلا عندما تذهب لتعلم السباحة فأنت تذهب لكي تكتسب العلم الذي يمكنك من السباحة. أما العلم النظري فهو العلم بالحقائق، كأن تعلم حقيقة أن باريس عاصمة فرنسا. وللتوضيح أكثر، تخيل أحد الناس قد قرأ كتابا كاملا عن كيفية السباحة سيكون لديه علم نظري عن السباحة، ولكن إن سقط في الماء لا يقدر أن يسبح لأنه يفتقر للعلم الفني الذي يمكنه من السباحة. وبالعكس، تخيل أحد الناس ماهرا تماما في السباحة، سيكون لديه علم فني في السباحة، ولكن إن طلبت منه أن يشرح لك كيف يسبح فلا يقدر أن يشرح لك لأنه يفتقر للعلم النظري. طبعا قد يجمع أحد الناس العلم النظري والفني للسباحة. المهم كانت الفلسفة قديما تشير إلى كل العلوم النظرية، الرياضيات والفيزياء والأحياء وهكذا. هو بيساوي ما بين بين الإلهيات والميتافيزيقا. The subject matter of metaphysics and Kalam. Since this book is concerned with issues that Avicenna understood as falling under the discipline of metaphysics, it seems sensible to begin with the question of what he took metaphysics to be. Sciences in the Aristotelian framework are distinguished by the subject matter, so we can pose the question more precisely by asking what the subject matter or موضوع of metaphysics is. Famously, Avicenna and Averroes disagreed about this, whereas Averroes thought that the subject matter of metaphysics is, or at least includes, the divine. Avicenna ruled this out on the basis that no science proves the existence of its own subject matter, rather its subject matter is simply granted or assumed, musallam, as for example the existence of motion is taken for granted, not proven in physics. But it is a task for the metaphysician to prove that God exists. And Avicenna duly does so in the metaphysical sections of his various works. Nor is metaphysics devoted to the study of causes more generally, and for the same reason, metaphysics has to establish the existence of causation. In support of this claim, Avicenna offers the observation that, as Ghazali and Hume will later argue, sensation can establish only conjunction, not causation. Thus we need a science that is not based on sensation to prove causation, and this is metaphysics. For Avicenna, the right answer to the question is that metaphysics is about the existent as such. الموجود بما هو موجود. This means that metaphysics should also inquire into the proper accidents or accompanying features, لواحق, of existence, like one and many, potentiality and actuality, universal and particular, and possible and necessary. And this is echoed by Bahmaniyar and Al-Nasafi, who explains how metaphysics investigates unity as an attachment of existence. With this, Avicenna places existence at the center of the highest philosophical science. One advantage of doing so is that he can easily make sense of the contents of most of Aristotle's metaphysics, which several times announces its own topic as being qua being, and includes extensive discussions of the aforementioned accompanying features of being in books like Iota and Theta. More problematic is Book Lambda of Aristotle's Metaphysics, which begins by rehearsing ideas from the physics and then discusses at some length the nature of God and the other celestial movers. Furthermore, in an influential passage elsewhere in the Metaphysics, Aristotle says that the first science is distinguished from physics and mathematics because it deals with things that are separate from matter and are unmoving, which certainly sounds like he's saying that metaphysics is about the divine mothers. But Avicenna can explain this too. God and the celestial intellects are, after all, existents, albeit especially exalted ones, so qua existent they fall under the purview of metaphysics, just like everything else does. Which is a good thing, since as immaterial entities, they fall outside the remit of natural philosophy. So if they were not proven and studied in metaphysics, they could not be proven and studied at all. The upshot is that theology is subsumed within metaphysics rather than being equated with it. Employing synecdoche, what is synecdoche? Avicenna allows us to call metaphysics as a whole divine science or first philosophy in honor of its most important part. Still, it would be a mistake to believe that metaphysics studies only immaterial things. It should also study material things insofar as they exist, and investigate the features that belong to them insofar as they are existent. Of course, these features belong to immaterial things too, since they too are existent. Clearly, metaphysics does not prove that there is existence, since this is its subject matter. Besides, it is a primary intelligible that is too obvious to need proof, and Avicennan doctrine invoked by several later authors. Nor does metaphysics establish the principles of existence as such. It does, however, establish the principles of certain kinds of existence. Again, this point is reiterated by Bahminiar and An-Nasafi. This gives metaphysics sovereignty over the other sciences, which take from metaphysics the principles that they need to investigate the more limited subject matters. In each case, the subject matter of these lower sciences will be a type of existent. For instance, natural philosophy studies those existents that are bodies. One question raised about the Avicennan view is whether existent is really the right designation for its maximally universal subject matter. Everything that exists is also a thing, so could not we instead say that metaphysics is a study of things? Al-Khayyam allows that this would not be wrong exactly, but since existent is epistemically prior to us, it is the more appropriate choice. Of course, so long as thing and existent are extensionally identical, this is really just a problem about how to refer to the subject matter that is under what intentional concept. But Ibn Kammona, who gives this issue a longer treatment, raises the difficulty that thing and existent may not be existentially equivalent after all. Some things actually lack existence, so that thing may seem to be more universal. He rebutts this with the unimpeachably Avicennan observation that all things have at least mental existence, if not external concrete existence. We will be returning to this issue later in the present volume. Though Avicenna's account comes through this query about things unscathed, it is heavily modified and critiqued for other reasons. Abul Barakat challenges the fundamental presupposition that human knowledge is in fact divided into distinct sciences. In fact, all sciences are one precisely because they all deal with existence, a classic example of an Avicennian insight being used against Avicenna. If we divide knowledge into various departments, we do this only for pragmatic and pedagogical reasons. In this sense, we may still accept a division of the sciences into logic, natural, mathematical, and divine sciences, or divine science or metaphysics. But Abul Barakat has his own criterion for the division of sciences. All sciences investigate either things that really exist, metaphysics and natural sciences, or those that exist in the mind, logic, psychology, and mathematics. As for the particular task of metaphysics, since all scientific knowledge concerns existence, this will not be its special task. Rather, it should inquire into things that possess divinity, which for Abul Barakat has a broader meaning extending beyond God to anything that exercises lordship. Thus, the class of the divine includes also angels and separate souls. As a result, metaphysics is the highest science because it confers the highest perfection on the human mind when it grasps the best possible objects of knowledge. The doctrine of the unity of the sciences is accepted by Shahrazuri, who, like Abul Barakat, describes an ascent and descent from more particular to more general sciences and back. These passages are reminiscent of ideas found later in the Latin tradition, especially in Zabarella's account of scientific method as involving progress towards principles which are then used to help understand the original starting points. Shahrazuri incidentally makes a good point that one might have expected to receive more discussion in this tradition, namely that if, as many authors in our period hold, existence is a merely conceptual item, it can hardly be a suitable subject matter for any science. Similar concern is expressed by Al-Hilli, namely that even if existence is experimentally real, it would be only accidental to things, and again not a fit subject for a scientific inquiry. Along with Abul Barakat, the most innovative account of metaphysics is offered by Fakhruddin al-Razi. This has been explored in an important study by Hayran Eshna, who, with some understatement, remarks that Al-Razi's structure no longer respects the traditional Abyssinian division of Aristotelian philosophy. A crucial text is Al-Razi's explanation of how he has arranged his work, the Mabahith al-Mashriqi. As Aishna explains, Al-Razi drops the basic division between natural philosophy and metaphysics and instead addresses himself to three topics: the most general things, al-umur al-amma, such as existence and its properties, non-existence, quiddity and unity and multiplicity, the contingent things, and the divine matters. Al-Suhrawardi has a similar idea in relation to A and B when he divides metaphysics into the realm study of the divisions of existence and theology. However, Al-Suhrawardi still separates natural philosophy and mathematics as distinct sciences. Even in those passages where Al-Razi agrees with Avicenna that metaphysics is a science that has existence as its subject matter, he tries to assimilate it to his project of studying common things, presumably taking his cue from Avicenna's suggestion that metaphysics could study opposed properties that belong to existence as such, like unity and multiplicity. Al-Razi puts forward no fewer than 20 such disjunctive pairings. Thus, in a development that anticipates ideas found in the Latin scholastic tradition, in this case the Duns Scotus, Al-Razi considerably expands the scope of ontology. For Al-Razi, ontology is a study of common things, an approach that is explained further by Al-Katibi. Al-Kashi explains why this broad investigation into common things is the first science one should undertake, and also integrates into the project the study of the lights dealt with in Illuminationist philosophy. Al-Razi's restructuring of science was probably motivated, at least in part, by the desire to adapt Avicennan philosophy to the traditional concerns of Kalam. As the list at T17 makes clear, the inquiry into common things will include investigation of the eternal and the created, the necessary and the contingent, the hidden and the manifest, and even the concepts, and even of concepts relevant to Kalam atomism. Thus his first dichotomy is space occupying or not, this being a property standardly ascribed to atoms. Yet the list also retains such Aristotelian contrasts as potential and actual unity and multiplicity, as well as distinctively Avicennan ones like necessary and contingent. Here then Al-Razi sets out the agenda that characterizes his project in the works he classifies as belonging to Hikmah, literally wisdom, and an original fusion of Kalam and Falsafa as presented by Avicenna. Many authors, including Al-Razi, find it plausible to identify Kalam with metaphysics, understood as a study of solely divine matters, which legitimizes the claims for its preeminence and comprehensiveness. But already Al-Ghazali observes that Kalam evolved from a historically earlier enterprise, namely Kalam as a mere dialectical defense of the faith, into a general science that investigates everything in the world, something that Al-Razi will call Hikmah later. This approach to Kalam can be detected already in Al-Juwayni, so it does not come as a surprise that in another passage Al-Ghazali equates Kalam with metaphysics in the Avicennan sense of an inquiry into existence and its proper features. The passage is adapted by Al-Hilli. Al-Urmawi, though, sticks with the idea that Kalam has God as its subject matter, which prompts him to wonder why it is metaphysics that is called divine science, which seems like it could be the proper name for Kalam. He even argues that the proof of God's existence is not a proper task for the mutakallimun, in keeping with the aforementioned rule that sciences should not establish the existence of their own subject matters. Later, Al-Samarqandi distinguishes between metaphysics and Kalam by saying that the latter investigates the same subject matter, but according to the canon of Islam. In other words, Kalam just is metaphysics but supplemented by revelation, and Al-Urmawi echoes the point at the end of T32. In our period, conceptual structures familiar from the Aristotelian sciences, such as the contrast between principles or mabadi and the problems masail, are also applied to Kalam. This is a move we find in Al-Samarqandi, who goes on in his Ma'arif al-Sahaif to include on the principles parts A and B of a Razi tripartite structure that is containing the contingent. Principles thus include everything apart from discussion of theology proper, which in turn is where we raise and solve the problems. A similar procedure, but with terminology taken from the Islamic sciences instead of Aristotle, is followed by Al-Tusi. He applies the notion of foundations, usul, and branches throughout the divine science, and fits everything covered within a Razi scheme into the structure. Ibn Kamuna uses the same idea, fusing it with the original Aristotelian tripartition of theoretical philosophy into physics, mathematics, and metaphysics. These various ways of dividing up the conceptual terrain may seem to be of little ultimate philosophical importance, but the debate covered in this chapter was not only a matter of labeling intended to help authors structure their books clearly. Rather, the passages below help to show how it could have been that so many authors who thought of themselves, at least in part, as theologians, particularly wound up doing so much Avicennian philosophy. In this spirit, Kalam and divine science could be construed narrowly, so as to include nothing but God and related topics, but it could also be construed broadly, so as to include all of ontology and even the study of natural philosophy under the heading of the contingent. This is part of the reason why these volumes on the years of Avicenna cover more or less the same territory dealt with in Avicenna's own works. اوكي، نتوقف هنا ولا نكمل؟ اظن كفاية كده، هجرب انام يعني ونكمل بكرة ان شاء الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.